Thank you everyone for joining our session on Cleantech Entrepreneurship. We have with us Jon Bonanno, who is the CXO of New Energy Nexus, who has himself built over nine companies in cleantech and has helped indirectly start hundreds as well. Rather than giving a full bio, I'm going to let Jon introduce himself, as I believe he is doing in his slide deck. So, Jon, feel free to share your slides and get started.
Well, first, I want to thank Lynn, Priya, David, the team at Climate Change AI. This is a fantastic forum, and we're very happy to be part and participants in this. I wish it was in Addis Ababa, but unfortunately, we're in the virtual world right now. Let me just share a screen because it might be easier. Let's see here, share. Tell me if that's up. Priya?
Yes, it's up.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it is.
If you go in full screen.
Yeah, there we go.
Good.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Now full screen.
We're good. Okay, perfect. We'll eventually get to product market fit, which is kind of the first step for any entrepreneur. But as Priya said, Jon Bonanno, the CXO of the New Energy Nexus. I think I want to start because of the moment we're in by understanding, at least my personal view, that in the last 3 months, it has become incredibly clear that we are faced with a natural world trifecta of human extinction. This is sort of above and beyond the human things like nuclear disaster and things like this. Because of habitat destruction and wildlife trafficking, we're experiencing a pandemic of historical proportions, and we can expect this to begin as new normal. We're going to look at the climate change part of this. I'd be remiss in not recognizing that the more we have to clear natural rainforests in the Amazon for beef or for palm oil monoculture in Indonesia, that we are taking away critical biodiversity that has protected humans for a very long time, and also this wildlife trafficking thing. But we'll focus here for the carbon-free transition. That's pretty exciting. So New Energy Nexus is a
Jon,
501c3.
Just to stop you,
Go ahead.
I think you're having some connection issues. So can I request all participants to please close to turn off their videos so we can save a bit of bandwidth here.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it better or not?
Yeah, and Jon, you can feel free to keep your video on, but maybe just to save some bandwidth on your end.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So New Energy Nexus is a 501c3. We've been around for 15 years. We have mobilized about $1.5 billion. Our customer is the entrepreneur. So the startup CEO and executive suite team are typically the people that we work with. We work to launch, fund, accelerate, and scale. As Priya said, I've been personally involved with 9 companies throughout my personal career. And that's as a founder, as an operator, as a funder, as a director, in all capacities, not all simultaneously. We are across the globe. So we have a team in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, China, Singapore, of course, across the United States, and we have partners in Europe. The vision is always the same. We believe that diversity and equity are critical to a non-carbon economy transition. And we think that 100% of the people deserve 100% clean economy. We have a program here, which is really what this was born out of, this work is born out of, which is a one-on-one consultation with our CEOs, whether they're funded or whether they're in network. I just offer you all the opportunity to sign up for our open office program, and hopefully Priya will post these slides somewhere and you all can review them at your pleasure, but I don't think this is really very interesting to stay on. My personal background is I was doing IT and wireless companies at the end of the late 90s. I was fortunate and lucky enough to work hard enough to create the opportunity to have a company that I started bought for a fair bit of money, which was fabulous. And it allowed me to be an investor, but also an operator of several businesses. I was a survivor of 9/11 underneath the South Tower the morning of that day. And it really put a very large exclamation point on how the global energy system was highly dysfunctional and highly inequitable. And so I decided that I needed to defund the problem. And by starting clean economy companies, we would take capital away from places that were highly centralized around liquid fossil petroleum. I didn't get to the pollution problem until later, and the biosphere challenges that we now face in spades. It really started as defunding the violence for me, but everyone has a different starting point. So as Priya said, I've been involved with several companies. One of, Fair Note has been Principal Power. It is the leading semi-submersible floating foundation company in the world to capture offshore wind resources, which is one of the best capacity wind resource in the world. But the trouble is you can't get to it because typically it's over 30 meters in depth at those at that area. The gentleman from EDF that was speaking in the breakout session, I thought that was of great interest that he's in this AI machine learning conversation around predictive analytics, making an intermittent generation resource something that can be predicted is highly valuable, and I think a place where the AI community can apply their themselves. Ian Rogoff is our chairman. So the chairman of New Energy Nexus is Ian Rogoff. He was a contributing partner on some of the content that we've created here. Obviously, you see his background as an engineer, also double E and MBA and all sorts of other things. So places where, obviously everyone has experienced Netflix binging, and that is a result of AI. We also see how fraud detection and credit card fraud detection in specific has been impacted in a positive way by artificial intelligence and applying machine learning to that. We also can apply it, as we've heard in several of the sessions this morning. And I thought those 5-minute those 5-minute sessions were fantastic. We see the world in a fairly wide swath of the clean economy transformation. Artificial intelligence can be applied to all of these places. Energy storage, green generation, grid management, mobility, logistics, and built environment. I think it's every one of these has a need for better predictive information data sets as sensors and controls become remote. We've seen the Nest acquisition many years back. That was all about built environment optimization and specialty algorithms across a huge data set of information that allows that platform to be so powerful. All of the big companies, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, et cetera, are all trying to figure out how they can play in the climate solutions game, and we're very happy for that. In our portfolio, so as I said, we do fund companies directly. We help them launch, we fund, we accelerate, we cultivate, and we scale these businesses from a 501c3 perspective nonprofit. Some of our companies of note are PowerFlex in the energy storage space. I heard someone speaking earlier about, I think it was the gentleman, Jacob Pettit, who was talking about how grid interactivity, best time of use to charge, discharge, grid to vehicle, these kinds of things. So PowerFlex was one of our portfolio companies that got bought by EDF. And that was a great success. Another company that's doing energy storage using predictive technologies with visual information is a group called Energy Vault, founded by the great Bill Gross. And that is somewhere where they're taking giant concrete blocks and using the kinetic energy to offset the need for, it's an energy storage medium. Also, InZinc is a company doing some interesting things. But anyway, I'm citing these as high-level themes around things of interest in the clean economy transformation, but also specific companies like Solar City, who we funded. But Solar.com is also a portfolio company, and they're doing acquisition. Someone earlier, I think it was Chris Henrik, accurately cited that acquisition of a solar customer is still a very, very high percentage of the total cost of installation. And we have to get that down if we're really going to accelerate the gigatons of offset that we expect from solar electricity. Solar.com is the leader there. We funded them. We fund them through grants, so we're not picking winners per se. We don't have an equity position. We just simply support the entrepreneurs in their ongoing business. OCG is working on creating a very, very large data set around deep water offshore wind predictability. They're creating a floater that can go out into the deep water and collect metadata, which is critical to developers like Scottish Power or whomever to go and build power stations out in these deep water areas. So huge data sets, applying AI and machine learning to those data sets to make really good business decisions that create sustainable and profitable assets. One of the gentlemen from EDF was talking about predictive around wind and solar. Everyone knows the challenge with intermittent generation is that they're intermittent. And certainly wind and solar are that. And so being able to predict either maintenance or generation is very important. So people should be thinking about that. I already talked about roof age issue that Chris cited. I think that's very important. Other companies of note, Station A, OpenEE, all huge data set companies mining to find the best commercial opportunities. We were a funder of Tesla in the early days, but I think that we can go well beyond just simply electric vehicles and look at autonomous ride sharing, better mapping to decrease carbon footprint, flying cars eventually. FluxEV is a company that we support in Open Office. They're looking to do what they call super commuters with a special financing platform and applying data analytics to that space can make their business decisions more on point. So all that's very important. But I do want to pause at the built environment because I think the built environment is a place that doesn't get enough attention when it comes to decarbonization. And some have cited that it's around 30% of all energy use. We actually believe it's more towards 40%, but it's fair to say that 30% is a big enough chunk. This is a place where artificial intelligence can make a significant difference because we use carbon to not only build the physical footprint, but then we also use carbon to keep the temperature correct for the environment, whether it's a refrigeration facility or whether it's a inhabited location. All of these companies are ones that we work with very closely. SkyCool Systems is doing something incredible around harnessing outer space cold, which is of course negative 400 and something degrees, and using it in a built environment through IR. Stanford Technology, great entrepreneur, et cetera. So we support them. Crossnote K is using standard PLC's old school PLC technology as the plug-in point, but then laying over a very sophisticated AI platform to be predictive and to reduce the load at the site. Stasis is using they're reducing the amount of typical HVAC requirement by using a phase change material that freezes at 60 degrees. And people would say, oh, that's quite incredible. But all this requires data analytics. I think there's nothing in here in our portfolio that wouldn't say, and I'm sure that Gabby will appreciate these comments, that most municipal organizations have very little idea of what their community looks like. And so I thought that her presentation earlier was fabulous around helping municipal organizations identify what would be the lowest hanging fruit for retrofit and getting the most carbon out of their built environment. I encourage that kind of work. But ultimately, these are companies. We believe the entrepreneur is the change agent. We think that government and philanthropy are important tools, but ultimately it is the entrepreneur, for-profit entrepreneur, creating a sustainable, long-term, high-growth business that will create the most impact on our climate crisis. So the first step that one has to take when considering a business is getting to go, is what we like to call it. A lot of you are potentially in laboratory environments, national lab situations, university situations. Maybe you're at a tech company at the moment and you're considering creating a division or a product for that big tech company using your tool set of AI and machine learning. I applaud you, of course, but before you set out on your journey, I think you really need to think very deeply about getting to a go. Because in business nomenclature, there's a go, no go. And I know there's an engineering nomenclature around this too, but getting to go is very, very important. And it starts really with what's your market slice. And to say the climate change, it's so broad that it doesn't really define the market. You have to look at what is my specific market. If I'm looking at electric vehicles, if I'm looking at generation, if I'm looking at built environment, what's the specific size? Many times people will focus on a market that is not important enough. It doesn't have the right cycle life. You could be on a down cycle. It doesn't have enough velocity. Maybe it doesn't have an immediate pain point that you can solve. Critical, get your market right. Spend time on this because I know that many of you are extremely brilliant in your field, but getting your market wrong will kill your idea faster than anything else. So get your market right. The next thing you need to do is you need to identify a compelling value hypothesis. What potentially could be the features of this product or service that I'm going to create? Who is my audience for this? How do I go to market with it? Is it a SaaS model? Is it a physical piece of equipment that then has an AI feature to it? What are my unique selling propositions to potential customers? And a famous statement from the Kleiner Perkins firm that says, like, will the dog eat the dog food? And you need to find that out, but you need to have a hypothesis of value first. The next step is really to test and be extremely diligent here. Getting to MVP is important, but iterating is the most important part of that, and learning from your feedback and iterate quickly. This is an intense and very active patience. It is not sitting back in any way. So you want to take your time doing this to get it right, but you need to be very, very careful about not rushing, because the priority is getting product market fit. It's not being first. Any leaders in IT, you'll see that they, in most cases, were not first. They were the best. And so I think getting that right is really, really important. Always retest, even after you've done your initial launch. Continue to do this market testing, customer testing, competition testing. And I think that understanding, are you at go, is a really important moment, and it's not necessarily apparent. And that, of course, feels very awkward, because that's more art than science, and I'm sure it sits uncomfortably, but that's the nature of it, is that you're not necessarily clear when you are actually at go. I think some of the things that you can be sure of when you're considering this is that when word of mouth is creating delighted customers, you are nearly there, and people will vote with their dollars. Are people consuming your product, and can you keep up with demand? Dissecting the dead bodies along the success path is a very important thing to do. And as it is our business to understand what is the cause of failure for entrepreneurs, the top three are right there. You don't have market fit. You didn't do the right work. You ran out of cash because you were pursuing the wrong market fit, typically. And then the team just couldn't execute. So those are the three key reasons why companies fail. And I've had the good fortune of being involved with 9 different companies. And through my work with New Energy Nexus, I have impact across hundreds of companies just because of our network. This rings true to me. The data certainly says it, but my experience definitely says this too. And in fact, one of my companies, Empower Microsystems, that we ultimately ended up selling to a large inverter company in China, we didn't get the market right. We were pursuing a market that was too small and highly competitive. Even though we thought we had a very good value proposition, we made a mistake on getting market fit, and it ultimately ended up selling the company at a great discount, and it was not considered a success by any of the participants. So getting it right is very important. I can speak from experience. So you can sign up for these open office sessions, and I wanted to leave a lot of time to discuss this openly with Priya about more of a fireside conversation, but I wanted to give that information up front. This is something, and finish here, is you have to be passionate about the thing you're trying to solve. And this was said by the great John Doerr. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a venture investor. He's invested in some of the greatest companies on earth. And this was something that he said time and time again about mercenaries versus missionaries. And you really have to be on the passionate, engaged side, because it's going to be an incredibly volatile journey. And you have to have grit and tenacity, and you need to have the ability to persevere. And if you're just a mercenary, I think you're not going to make it. And this was really what he was trying to say here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, if I can do that. And I want to go back to Priya. I'm having trouble here. Give me one second. Okay, I'm going to go back to Priya. And
Awesome.
I'm going to, hey, okay, we're back.
We are back. Great. Thank you for that presentation, John. That was really good. And especially as somebody coming from a research background, that had some really useful considerations for me to think about going into the clean tech space. So
Good.
we'll start with me kind of, asking you a couple of questions, and we do have questions starting to come in from the audience too. So we'll flip to those at some point.
Okay.
So I guess a first question is, so given that this is largely a climate change plus machine learning audience, what things are especially promising about the entrepreneurship space, not just in terms of applications, but in terms of the practice of it for applications that are really at this intersection of machine learning and clean tech? So for instance, in terms of funding sources, in terms of potential partners, in terms of enthusiasm from Silicon Valley, various things. How are these things assets? But then also maybe how are these things how can these lead to potential pitfalls that researchers should look out for as they go into the clean tech startup space?
That is a great question. And I think that I'd like to take you to 35,000 feet. There's an enormous mistake that happens a lot with entrepreneurs that are new to building businesses, which is that, I guess, and most of you won't even get this reference, but there was a magazine in the 90s called The Red Herring, and it was all about the celebrityism of venture capital. And they've done an absolutely brilliant job at promoting themselves as the only capital option to fuel your business, when in fact, it is one of many, many, many ways to fuel your business. We did an open office session with Jonathan Tan recently, one of our CEOs, around capital fuel. And actually, I should try and I'll circulate that link to you so you all can share it. Our belief is that there are a plethora of options to fund your business, and what you care about as a CEO is putting cash on your balance sheet. And whether you do that through a non-ring engineer, whether you do that through a joint development agreement, whether you do it through a prize or through some sort of award or grant like we do, whether you do it through a delighted customer placing a purchase order, there are varieties of ways that are non-dilutive or lightly dilutive that you can take to not only cultivate future customers, but also perpetuate your business forward. And even if you're in deep research, part of that getting market fit right is an iterative process with a live potential customer. That is the paramount way of finding your way on that market fit. So I encourage people to go and take a look at the open office sessions, and specifically the financial fuel. You're going to be amazed at how janky it is. It's a Drive folder with a bunch of subfolders. It's very old school, so my apologies for making it so ugly, but we just would be easier for people to navigate that way. So I would encourage, I'm going to fuel my business from a venture investment from Sequoia or from some other organization. Consider all your options first, and we lay them out over an hour session together between Jonathan and myself. So I would suggest that you go and take a look at that. That's a really good resource.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So next question is, so in your talk, you talked about a couple of even like futuristic technologies, autonomous vehicles, which are little close technologies. The effects on the climate can be uncertain. For instance, autonomous vehicles could lead to efficiency gains, as is one of the pitches, but it can also lead to more vehicle miles traveled. And so for companies like this that are very tech dependent, but the tech could go in either direction, how do we make sure as an entrepreneur that they end up actually being clean tech as opposed to just tech?
I mean, it's clear as day that the lifetime cost of ownership of an electric vehicle, assuming that you have a clean grid, it's far superior financially. So any fleet owner, whether it's heavy duty, light duty, medium duty, passenger vehicle, are very seriously considering these electrification options for their mobility, primarily because of the money. And as the cost of the energy storage medium falls, which is the primary driver of cost in the electric vehicle, the cost is going to be clear to fleet owners, and it already is clear. So I think that we can be less concerned around that. Certainly, improved mapping from things like Waze or Google Maps and things like this are huge improvements in human time efficiency, which of course is a potential win for the non-carbon economy. Also, all the logistics. I mean, there's a giant industrial logistics world that happens that is vastly untouched by this decarbonization as of this moment. And so there's huge potential in AI and machine learning playing a role in optimizing those businesses. Things like transportation logistics. I mean, Amazon is the master of this, and they're applying it every day. So I think that autonomous vehicles, obviously flying vehicles is a little more of sort of a gee whiz fun thing, because it doesn't really affect 100%. It's not a low cost option at all, but it does potentially move people out of an urban center. But nevertheless, I think that we can apply AI to decarbonizing mobility just because it's lower cost. And of course, we need better energy storage medium. And we have about 6 companies in our direct fund portfolio, and we have many more in our network trying to find a better chemistry, a better iteration of energy storage, whether it's zinc, whether it's lithium, whether it's a better AI, for example, platform and management, grid interactivity for stationary storage. There's a lot of applications there. So I think that we can have confidence that the cost of the energy storage medium is the driver. And ultimately, even now, when looking at lifetime cost of ownership, which fleet operators only do, we're seeing the transition well underway.
Yeah, so I'm totally with you in terms of electric vehicles and cost being a huge driver to adoption. But in terms of, I think, specifically autonomous vehicles, and even the thing you mentioned about moving people out of urban centers, even as these technologies get lower cost and become more efficient, of course, a more efficient car used for more miles may not necessarily be a net drop on emissions. So in some sense, I guess, a part of the question is, how do you, as a clean tech entrepreneur who's maybe like developing a technology like autonomous vehicles, how do you potentially have some control over the outcome of sort of, is it being used in a climate beneficial way, or is it, for example, causing people to move out of urban centers, drive more, and as a result cancel out emissions benefits that could come from that?
I mean, the electric vehicle carbon problem and pollution problem is twofold. The first is your source of energy. Is it clean? Like that's where your carbon starts.
Specifically autonomous, not electric. So electric, I think we're good. I'm good with you, but autonomous specifically.
Well, autonomous and decarbonization is the question. Okay.
Yes.
I think you've got to look at, does autonomous create more miles driven, and then the medium of getting from point to point? Do you not? I mean, I think we'll probably converse on this point. I need you to ask the question in a different way, because I'm still not sure where we want to go with that question.
Got it. So I guess the phenomenon, I'm trying to get at two pieces here. So the phenomenon I'm addressing is sort of the Jevons Paradox. So this idea that if you increase the efficiency of a particular resource, its consumption,
they're going to use it more.
Exactly. Right. And so I guess the question is, as a clean tech entrepreneur, you may be the one who's innovating on the efficiency of the technology, but in some sense, you may not have a huge amount of control about whether there are Jevons effects or where there aren't. And so to what extent can you, as a clean tech entrepreneur, control that outcome? Are there things that you can be doing as you're, in addition to actually developing the technology, to ensure that it's used in a way that is actually beneficial in this?
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes it clear.
But see, you're pointing to a really important point, which is we're going to use autonomous vehicles to make logistics more efficient and more safe, right? But the other thing that's happening is that the cost of ownership for that medium that will transport from point to point is also changing. So you have more variables changing than simply, how do I make my autonomous platform that moves people or things around more efficiently and more safely? I want to make sure that that's used in a decarbonizing kind of way. Maybe people are going to move more, or maybe they're just going to order from Amazon more often, or something like this. The thing that you also have to recognize, that's sort of one vector, but then you have the second vector, which is that the energy storage industry at whole is driving costs down, so that the total cost of ownership of whatever medium moves the things or people from point to point is going down precipitously, and literally day by day. So you have two vectors of intersection there that will almost ensure, assuming that we continue on the trajectory that the energy storage medium is going in, we assume that fleet owners will always act in their best commercial interest. And that means the lowest cost. And so you can, you can't assure it, but it would be very, very illogical if someone would say, oh, I'm going to create this autonomous network for logistics or for people, and now it's going to be used for diesel trucks that are hugely inefficient, because they just aren't as cost effective for that fleet operator. So you have to consider the market. You have to consider the actual application, and you have to consider all factors that are changing the environment. It's always like the different set of circumstances at the time. And right now, I think that if you're doing something really clever with autonomous, it will almost certainly be used, whether it's a fleet operator or a logistics company or a people mover. It's going to be used with an electric medium. Even the flying cars are all most of them are considering electric because of this reason, the total cost. So flying cars are kind of out there, so let's not use them as a benchmark, but certainly autonomous electric vehicles will be the norm for application, just because the lowest cost of ownership.
That makes sense. So it's about kind of considering not only the statics, if my technology were applied in the current environment, but you're also sort of considering the dynamics of the market as well.
Environmental considerations, you might call it, because you're building your autonomous AI platform in a world where the logical, reasonable business owner is going to use the lowest cost transportation, and they're going to apply that to electric, because that's where the lowest cost will ultimately be. Now, are we there yet today? We're getting close. But if you look at something like Proterra is the leading American all electric bus for people company, and their demand is off the charts. And Ryan Poplar is someone who's in our network and very active with us. The writing's on the wall. It will be all electric mobility within the next 10 years because it's the lowest cost.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for that. So I think one more question from my end before we start to get to some of the audience ones. So I guess we've talked a little bit about technologies that maybe have, nearer term profitability or nearer term application. But there are, of course, a lot of high risk technologies that are needed for decarbonization, things like alternative fuels to decarbonize aviation, where maybe the timescales for working on this aren't necessarily in the investment cycle of a lot of people. And I know you made the point earlier about not just depending on VCs, but generally speaking, how do we kind of fuel more money into these kinds of longer term, higher risk technologies that are ultimately good for the climate?
I think Climate Change AI should work with their corporate partners and their foundation partners to create a platform for granting. You're in a very amazing position to have someone like a top tier tech company say, Priya, you and your folks are super smart. Here's $10 million a year for the next 5 years. And then they pool all that together with others. And you as a nonprofit organization are granting 250,000, 500,000, $1 million non-dilutive grants to these amazing entrepreneurs. I mean, we have 70 people watching this program right now, and I'm sure that many, many tens more will look at it. Climate Change AI should be a go-to place for grant making. And your corporate partners need to recognize that the innovation cycle in energy, especially at the early stage, is completely broken. Because if you do not have market fit, private equity will not touch the deal in most cases. So we need to get more entrepreneurs funded with a tool that's very easy to use, like a grant, so that they can pursue a real business plan. They can pursue the market fit with potential customers. And believe me, when you get market fit with your potential customer, it is like instant lightning in a bottle, and they are going to pay for it. And then you have revenue, then you have a customer, then you're in a totally different stratosphere in terms of building your business. But I honestly think that the best thing that, besides the thought leadership, which of course you guys are doing in spades, and it was demonstrated by those 5-minute blips before, your community is incredibly robust. I think what's missing is a giant, high velocity, high scale granting mechanism that Climate Change AI should be granting out to their community. Apply, you're reasonable, fine, here's your first check, go. Give me 2 things you're going to do, come back in 6 months. If you don't come back, I know I'm not writing you a second check. If you come back and you say, oh, I failed, okay, well, you don't get another check either. But then there's some portion of those people that you make those grants out to. Say you made 1,000 grants a year at $500,000, okay? That's an enormous community that you're cultivating a fertile environment for solutions. And that is really what Google, Facebook, Microsoft, et cetera, they should be putting money towards. If they put $10 million, $20 million, $100 million a year, it's frankly nothing in terms of their budgets. But the amount of innovation that they would cultivate in the artificial intelligence towards climate solution space would be astronomical, because everyone understands that artificial intelligence is one of those leveraging technologies that can create quantum change very swiftly if you get market fit right. And so that's why I started with get market fit right, because if you get market fit right, you transform your company from a pre-revenue company to a revenue company. But we need tools. And I really support the conversation you and I have had in the past, which is Climate Change AI should be the go-to granting global agency for professionals in the space trying to solve their slice of the climate change problem. And I say the climate change problem because this is a multifaceted problem. Is it generation? Is it mobility? Is it built environment? There's so many aspects to it. We need to cover the field with water and seed.
Got it. Yeah. And thank you for the suggestions too. And yes, tech companies have a lot of money, and I really do hope they pour it into climate change innovations here.
But also foundations, Priya. I mean, let's not forget foundations. Foundations are enormous, mission-aligned capital organizations that should be saying, Priya, you and your climate change associates are doing a fabulous job at creating this beautiful community. Here's $100 million a year. Okay. Grant as fast as you can, high velocity and high scale, and be okay with getting it wrong.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to flip to audience questions here. And the first is going to be delivered, I think is going to be read out loud. So Lynn, do you want to take that away?
Yeah, the first question, something I rephrased a little bit. So it gets around the issue that clean tech is really dependent on the policy landscape. And many companies actually depend on government funding. But this also means that they're vulnerable to political changes. And the question is how you deal with that large uncertainty in your work in the US and beyond.
It's hard. I mean, it's very hard. That's why we believe that the for-profit entrepreneur is the change agent we seek. We have government partners who fund our grant making. We have philanthropic foundations who fund our grant making. We are the largest non-governmental global grant maker to diverse clean economy entrepreneurs. And I hear this concern all the time that grant making from my government partner is problematic because you have left versus right, or you have this particular thing or that. It is a challenge, but I'll tell you, if you get your market fit right, you're now funded by revenue. So getting that market fit right is critical. And I hate to continue to go back to this, but you are transforming your idea into a commercial venture that can then be transported with alternative fuel sources, capital fuel sources. And that's a really important transition for you as an entrepreneur. And we're happy to help you with that. We as the largest grant maker, we do have grants available, and in a variety of flavors. But honestly, Priya and Lynn and David and others are creating such a robust community around artificial intelligence and machine learning. You should be the place to make grants, right? And I know that there was something that came up in the chat about Microsoft putting money into this and that. And hey, okay, great. Then put $10 million in this foundation, distribute that money in 12 months in grants, right? That's a good way to do it. And I have a lot of experience doing this. Let me tell you a little story. In 2006, I moved from Barcelona, Spain to San Francisco. And I immediately joined a group called Keiretsu Forum, which is the largest angel investor network in the world. I became the head of the Clean Tech Investment Committee, which really meant you were just kind of a lightning rod for work. It was also kind of fun because I got to meet a lot of great entrepreneurs and a lot of fellow investors and these kinds of things. 2006. I got a call one day from a prolific angel investor, made investments in Google and a bunch of other stuff. And he said, tell me what this clean tech thing's all about. And I said, well, it's this, 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 and this. And he's like, He goes, let me tell you my strategy. He goes, I didn't do deep due diligence on my early investment. He said, I sat at the gate of Stanford University, and anyone with a pulse, no criminal record, and a decent idea, I wrote them a small check. And I said, come back in 6 months' time with a single thing that you're going to do. And I've learned this investment strategy from this person, which is that he let the money separate the wheat from the chaff. Because if you're going to write a sub $5 million check as an equity investment, it's it's totally inefficient to do the amount of diligence that would be required. It's easier to write a $50 million check than it is to write a $5 million check. So my point is that grant dollars are critical to pre-revenue companies. And we have to encourage our capital partners, whether they're governments, which we do work with on granting dollars, whether they're foundations or whether they're corporates. We have to encourage them to understand that the pre-revenue companies are where key grant dollars need to be injected at high velocity and high scale. And I don't know how you get around your problem of going grant to grant with, whether it's a government agency or it's a quasi-government agency. And I think they play an incredibly important role, like the National Science Foundation or Department of Energy, they have fantastic programs, but they're pretty cumbersome and they do get affected by politics. And so I think we have to say, let's create a very strong climate change AI and have our corporate partners fund it. Say you all have your corporate partners fund it, have your philanthropic partners fund it, and then do high velocity and high scale grant making to encourage these entrepreneurs to take that next step, get market fit. And by getting market fit, you transform the company from one that needs non-dilutive, what one would call concessionary capital, to one that can now engage the private capital markets in a profitable venture optic.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience. How can a clean tech investor or entrepreneur make sure they do not end up supporting practices against human rights or the environment upstream or downstream of their project? For example, children working in mining. I mean, that's a sad result for someone who wants to do something good for nature and the people.
Yeah, well, it's a problem in every industry, not just energy, not just the clean economy. There's a lot of screens. If you're in the public markets, there's a lot of screens around ESG and B Corps and things like this. There's a load of measuring and accounting systems. And so I think you need to engage those. It's horrific when you see that kind of thing. One of our portfolio companies, a group called Lilac Solutions, was doing lithium extraction from geothermal brine water, specifically in the Central Valley of California, because according to geologists, we happen to have the largest reserve of lithium in the world, or at least one of them. And it's all in lithium brine, liquid, and not in solid rocks. So that solid rocks cost a lot to create the material you want for energy storage, because you have to grind them up and prepare them for market. Lithium brine extract from brine is far more cost effective if you can get it out cost effectively. And so this company is proving at subscale that they can pull out the lithium brine without the requirement for child labor, for example, in places like Mexico or China or South America. So the avoidance of that through a technological breakthrough is quite a wonderful outcome.
Got it. Sorry, I think we had some connection issues there, but I think we got the end of that just fine. So I guess there is a question about, so New Energy Nexus is of course based in California. And so there is a question about, do you work in the UK? Do you work in Cambridge, London? But I think generally I'd actually love you to talk a bit about, New Energy Nexus's global reach and like why you thought that was important and like how that works. Because I think a lot of funding discussions end up being pretty US centric.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. In fact, most of our grant making over the next year or so is going to happen in Indonesia. So yes, we were founded in California 15 years ago. We're now in New York as well. So we work with NYSERDA in the state of New York. We work primarily with the California Energy Commission here in the state of California. We work with ID and Hewlett Foundation and Packard Foundation and IKEA Foundation throughout China, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and soon to be in India. Europe, we are less active. We do have New Energy Nexus partners where we're partnering with incubators, accelerators, university startup centers on best practices and digital content. And we have an annual convening called the Accelerate Energy Summit, AES. And you can get all those resources on our website, newenergynexus.com. But yeah, we have studied, and this was really at the, our leader, Danny Kennedy, is amazing. And about 3 years ago, he said, we need to take the entrepreneur climate fight or climate solutions support to the place of the greatest need. And Southeast Asia is arguably the place of the greatest need. Its population is growing very quickly. People are moving into the middle class, or at least have been until recently. And they're primarily through the Belt and Road Initiative being subsidized with low-cost coal. And we need to avoid that with products of equal value and quality. So if a solar energy storage microgrid can deliver the same value and quality as a janky connected grid with hub and spoke mentality around inefficiently burned coal, then we win. And we need to create business models and products that support the Indonesian people as entrepreneurs to solve solutions locally from them, not employing sort of, hey, we're going to go solve your problem for you. No, we need to grow entrepreneurship everywhere. I mean, part of our work and in our mission is around diversity. And we believe that not only our organization, but we believe that the solution set needs to reflect the society we serve. So women in entrepreneurship, people of color, people from regions that are not traditionally supported by private capital. I mean, not all entrepreneurs are Male Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. We need to really open up our diversity lens, because we believe that the diversity will serve our community in a very sustainable way. And it's ultimately, you're allowed to stay because you reflect them and you reflect the values of those people.
Really fantastic points. Yeah, definitely very important. So we have a question from an audience member, Daniel Sassant, about generating ideas. So I'm actually going to unmute him so he can ask it himself. Daniel, I think you are unmuted, I think.
Yes, thank you so much. Great. Yes, my question was, for those of us who have got either helpful machine learning skills, or be that business or sustainability specific skills, and a strong desire to venture, are there good fora or mechanisms that you know of that you can recommend to sort of shape founding teams, shape ideas, maybe join founders who are business founders but are looking for a techie, or tech founders looking for a business or sustainability skill set? Where can we generate this? Is that something that New Energy Nexus provides? Do you have mechanisms for this, entrepreneurs in residence positions, or even anything unrelated to New Energy Nexus that you can point us to? Thank you.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you for that. We have this open office program, and frankly, open office, Danny and I, our executive director, Danny and I decided that we were no longer just going to limit open office to working with our funded companies, and that we were going to open up the open office program, which is a one-on-one custom bespoke mentor and coaching program. We're going to open it up to anyone in the clean economy. And so I encourage you to email Jessica as per the slides. And I think Priya, I'll send them to you and you can circulate it to whomever's interested. Email Jessica, get a slot on the calendar, and we'll have a coaching session together. And I think because of our network visibility, we might be able to direct you towards things of interest. But I want to go back to the point that I made earlier that John Doerr has gone on for years about, which is mercenary or missionary. I think you really, for yourself, have to decide what gets you excited. You may have artificial intelligence skills, machine learning skills, this and that. I think that you need to think for yourself what really gets you excited, because this is not a simple journey. It's doing your own thing or joining a startup can be incredibly difficult. And I caution that, because you won't get through it if you're just a mercenary. And you really strongly focus on, it sounds so trite to say that, because there's just, too much follow your passion stuff. But the truth is that if you don't have that missionary mindset and real fire, you're going to burn out. And we don't want to see that. We want to see good professionals joining the community and being productive and being happy ultimately. And a lot of these coaching sessions, honestly, as you can imagine, with 68 funded portfolio companies, we have a lot of ongoing work to do with our CEOs. And much of the work I do in these open office sessions is emotional support. These are extremely trying times for the leader of organizations. And it is sometimes just being emotionally supportive and being a whiteboard that has no judgment. Because as a leader of an organization, you can't really go to your other participants potentially and be vulnerable. But it was something that the chairman Hawkstrand from the California Energy Commission said the other day. This isn't social distancing, it's physical distancing. And I wanted to add on to what he said, which was we should increase our social intelligence and intimacy during these times. It is a real key to success, to be vulnerable, to be intimate, to be genuine. And this is what we have the opportunity to do in open office. And so, Daniel, I really appreciate your question. How do you get involved? How do you get engaged? Well, sign up for an open office session. We can have a chat. You can also go to, we don't have a hired EIR-like position that you're referring to, the Entrepreneur in Residence. We don't currently have that. We do have something called Explorer in Residence, which is a funded position. And that comes up periodically. So that's where we have a $10,000 grant that we offer to an explorer in residence, where they come in and incubate an idea, not physically with us, because we're not an incubator in that way, but they incubate the idea virtually, if that's helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes.
All right, thank you. We're going to take one last audience question before we close out the session. So this is from Shubham Bansal, who I will unmute to ask the question as well. Shubham, you should be unmuted.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, John, for sharing your thoughts there. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I was just wondering if you have some advice that you're giving to entrepreneurs on how COVID will affect the whole clean tech landscape, especially with regards to funding and how entrepreneurs should approach it.
Well, I don't mean to be in front of you on this, but I'm going to give Priya this link to the Jinky Drive that I referred to before. We did a program about CFO survival, and most of our companies don't even have a CFO. So you're asking a CEO to play a CFO role. They may have set up QuickBooks. They may have done sort of the basic things, but Jeff Berklin is a friend and a Harvard Business School person that I've known for a decade and a half. Have a lot of respect for him. He works with over 200 companies across the nation as a part-time CFO, or his organization does. And so he really has very strong pattern recognition. I would encourage you and anyone who's interested to go to that session and listen to Jeff's advice. And he gives 5 very key steps for basic CFO in crisis types of activities to consider. And it's a really good question, but I also want to go back to the fact that, yeah, you can take the right financial steps, but ultimately being calm in a storm like this and being emotionally grounded in these decision-making type of moments is really, really important. And so as important as the tactical work that you may have to do around cutting costs or doing a variety of activities that Jeff suggests, I also strongly suggest that you need to be emotionally ready for those decisions. And that's something that you need to prepare for. And you need to work on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And a couple of folks are asking if you can share the link to the session. So I can share that with attendees afterwards. We also tweeted about it from the Climate Change AI Twitter account. So if that is faster for you than waiting on me to send it, then that's also an option.
I'll send it all to you. Okay. And I just wanted to say how grateful I am to, I reached out to Priya, gosh, maybe 90 days ago or something like this, maybe even more, not too much more though. I heard her on The Interchange, which is an amazing podcast with Shale Khan and Stephen Lacey, one you all should be listening to. And she was so clear And I was so inspired by her. I just reached out and said, hey, this is what we do. How can we help? And I really enjoyed working with her. And I had a chance to meet David Rolnick, and that was really a pleasure. And Lynn, the team leadership at Climate Change AI is 100% aligned with our work. And I want to finish by saying, anyone who's listening, whether they're a Google executive or a Facebook executive or a Microsoft executive or whomever, the way to encourage this community is to grant make to pre-revenue companies doing AI machine learning solution around the climate. And I strongly encourage you to be in touch with Priya and to make that happen, because this is a moment of transformation, and we're going to decide what happens to humanity in the next decade, which means we have to start right now.
I like the takeaway of that, which is give Priya money. Sounds good to me. Thank you so much, Jon. And yeah, and I guess, yes, Jon will share the resources with us. And can I share your contact information also with the audience if they'd like to get in touch?
Yeah, of course.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we will be flipping to the last session of today very soon, which is Machine Learning 101 for climate change. And so just give us a few minutes to set that up, and we'll be right there.